Then it wanes, disappearing again into the oblivion of deep space.
Well, I guess you'll like this one then. A new study suggests that half of Americans alive today may have had their IQ lowered due to lead poisoning. The study basically looks at anyone born before the 1996 ban on leaded gasoline. Those born before it may have had their IQ lowered by 3 points on average and may suffer from faster aging of the brain as they get older. This is, of course, not the only pollution-related effect on IQ in the second half of the 20th century. Many scholars believe the drop in the crime rate in the late 80s may have been at least partially due to various laws reducing the lead exposure of Americans. Many people are still exposed, however, especially in poor, often historically Black communities where there's no money to improve rotting public infrastructure, for instance, in Flint, Michigan.
Okay, you should have opened with this one because this could have answered a lot of our previous questions.
Yeah, when we're talking about why is everyone so crazy? It's
right,
lead, baby.
It's the lead. And yeah,
just the lead.
The lead.
You got to get the lead out.
Okay, so here's the conspiratorial part that I find shocking. I always feel the need to address two Americas when I'm talking. I am addressing the audience in the world that cares about looking at something and trying to take it apart themselves. That's who I'm addressing. It is shocking how this is going to be taken care of. Basically, nobody's going to care, nothing's going to be done, and nobody's going to address it. We basically just, what is a normal IQ? I bet you know. I bet you have some idea of what the number is.
I mean, technically 100, but it's normalized, so it's kind of meaningless. Like it's all the norm. The number 100 is always going to be the normal IQ in any given distribution, just because that's the way the tests are set up. If the median is like 97 or something, they'll make 100 the new 97.
Oh, good. That makes life easy.
But it's 100. That's the answer.
Okay, good. So you made $100 on your paycheck, but they gave you 95. How hard is this for people to wrap their brain around? Apparently, it's really hard because we all have 5% less. But basically, you literally have 5% less brain power because of.
It's a 3-point drop on average.
Oh, okay. Well, 3 points.
So 3%. 3%. That's not so bad.
Well, they also said other factors. They were basically also saying that other things that we might have done can also cause this to us. So it basically means we could be just shaving our brains away with this. And now that's not the shocking part. The shocking part is nobody will care and nobody will do anything. It's not why lead was taken out.
Oh, yeah.
And it will not, and people might be saying, well, what do we do about it now? What we do about it now is we utilize it as an example of we just made the entire planet less intelligent because of the repercussions of something that we did.
Yeah.
I mean, that should be eye-opening to a lot of people that a basically global choice as small as that made us dumb.
Yeah. And 3 points isn't a lot, but it's like
it's going in
there's
the
a
wrong
lot when you're
direction.
talking about brain, right?
Yeah, it's going in the wrong direction that evolution implies that humanity is going, or that we like to think that evolution is sending us, whether it's true or not.
We would prefer not to be dumb, right?
Yes, we want to get better. It's contrary to the human experience.
No, this is interesting though, because here's the thing: people tend to think of IQ as something that is basically how your brain is wired due to your genes or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you get something like this. It's easy to understand that exposure to toxic chemicals while your brain is developing is going to mess with your connections a little bit. But also, IQ is not a measure of how good your brain is. IQ is a measure of how well you do on an IQ test.
Yeah,
And
it's a measure of your ability to problem solve.
well, kind of. Here's the thing. IQ is not, people who do these tests today, who study this, who look at this, IQ is not very useful for really for assessing individual abilities, which is what people assume that IQ is for. What IQ is for, really, what it's actually useful for, is looking at 1,000 people and saying, the 1,000 people over here got these scores, and the 1,000 people over here who coincidentally live next to the paint chips and radioactive waste factory got these scores. What can we say about this? IQ is useful for assessing developmentally disabled people as one diagnostic tool in a whole bunch of different other diagnostic tools. And IQ is useful for if you've got a kid who basically tests well, for saying, maybe they need to be moved into harder curriculum because this isn't challenging them.
Right.
What IQ is
problem solving and pattern recognition. That's basically what all the things are. They're mathematical problem solving situations or pattern recognition situations.
Well, see, that's what it's designed to be, but it doesn't actually do a great job at that.
Yes, I'm totally with you.
Right.
On that.
IQ
is highly biased to the.
Right, and it's not nearly as biased as it used to be, but still, basically, what IQ measures is how good you are at taking tests. And if anyone who's an adult and says, well, my IQ is 150, it's it's meaningless. Your IQ basically stops having any meaning for an individual person beyond school age. It's useful to determine what classes people should be in. So now, I'm not saying this 3-point drop isn't a big deal. I'm just saying the point I was working towards is that there are many other things that also cause a 3-point drop, or more, right? If your parents don't read to you as a child, that can be just as bad as if you've got lead poisoning, basically. There are so many things that have nothing to do with the way your brain is wired that are going to lower your scores on an IQ test.
Okay, well, what I was saying is the global implications of what this means should affect us. But as far as what you're saying is, so I'm
saying we should be worried about those things too. I'm saying we should.
Well, are we also saying that it's just as likely that the IQs dropped in those areas because nobody gave a crap enough to fix their pipes, and therefore that was representative of the types of attitudes going into teaching and growing that culture?
I mean, yeah, it's possible. I think they can probably get more if you see IQs before the 1996 ban and IQs after, and you see a big change, you can think, yeah, lead probably had something to do with it, right? But there are so many things that are going to affect how well someone does in school. There are so many different factors, and we should all care about lead poisoning is an easy thing to wrap your head around. But what about we should all care about making historically impoverished communities better places to grow up so that kids don't have bad outcomes for reasons that are beyond their control. It's not quite the same thing as being poisoned with lead, but it kind of has the same exact effect.